Good evening, everyone. I'm not going to get into any kind of long soliloquy, except to just welcome everyone this evening. One thing that I wanted to do, however, is I wanted to acknowledge some of our guests today. In addition to the panelists that we have here, we have several former NOMAS presidents, vice presidents, officers, either here or virtually online. So for those of you who are here, please recognize yourselves. Who do we have?
I'll go first. Chris Baker, former NOMAS president. What was that, 2013, 2014?
Yes.
Yep. That
was the year that we came second in the National NOMAS Student Design Competition. Right. So welcome back, Chris. Where's Kyle Miles?
Right.
Kyle.
Kyle Miles, I was a former NOMAS president, 2016, 2017.
Yeah. All right. Welcome back. And then, do we have any online? If so, maybe you can. I don't know if you can unmute yourself. Do we have any online former presidents? They may be muted. Any other officers, former NOMAS officers that are here today that would like to be recognized, that might just happen to be sitting down?
Hi, Chloe Dodson, alumni, graduated back in 2013 for a master's in urban planning. What else I was supposed to say?
Are you from NOMAS?
Yes, I was the president for quite some time and then a secretary for quite some time. I think I'm still part, probably.
All right. So we had a program last year, thanks to the wonderful work of Christine in our planning department and others that helped with this. And one of them was a piece with Meticulous, up and coming firm in Indianapolis. And that was a wonderful conversation, and that really led to the impetus for this event. And we want to continue to do this every year and bring back graduates, particularly from underrepresented populations that were either part of NOMAS or just representing out in the field as professionals. And that's what led to this event, and we're really pleased with this first program. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. G here, who's going to take it from here. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Joshua G, current president of the Ball State chapter of NOMAS, National Organization of Minority Architects. We are an organization seeking to create unity and empower our members to succeed in the design field. And here we make sure to gain experience while having fun and also exploring culture. All are welcome, and we meet in AB 310 Mondays at 5 p.m. So here I have JT, John Tishner, my vice president on the panel, as well as Brian Dickerson, one of our NOMAS members. Now I'm going to ask our guest speakers we're so happy to have here to introduce themselves.
Hello, everybody. It's an honor to be here. My name is Ernst Brown. I graduated in 2019 from Landscape Architecture Department, and currently right now I am working at Fanning and Howie, which is downtown Indianapolis. We specialize in K through 12 in higher education design. I personally design and specialize within sporting design, and yeah, that's a little bit about me.
All right, yeah, it's nice to meet everybody. Nice to be here. Just walking through the building, I was like, oh my God, I don't remember any of this. So old. But my name is Delicia Monet Malone. I am a doctoral candidate at Temple University currently. Also programs director and facilities director at the Purdue Black Cultural Center. I graduated in 2008 in urban planning. Currently am an independent designer, which I'll share more about a little bit later, but it's great to be here.
Thank you. Adrian Russell. Actually, I started here in CAP in 2007 and actually did a year within the CAP program before going over to construction management. So I graduated construction management at Ball State in 2011 Currently, I am Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, as well as Procurement for Shield Sexton in Indianapolis. Born and raised in Indianapolis, and it's definitely a pleasure to be here with all of you. 15 years ago is a long time, so before you know it, you'll be old and wet, just like us. So, but thank you.
And then throughout the event, we would. Oh, Maya Bird Murphy. Yes. Maya Bird Murphy, could you please introduce yourself as well?
Yes. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Well, hello everybody. I'm sorry that I couldn't be there in person today, but it's really nice to see familiar faces and familiar names. I'm in Chicago currently. I went to Ball State and graduated. I did architecture and graduated in 2014, and now I am running my nonprofit that's called Chicago Women Makers here from Chicago. Thank you.
Thank you for being here on Zoom. So throughout the event, if anyone has a pertinent question they'd like to ask our guest speakers, you can raise your hand and we'll try to get to you. There will be a time at the end for questions as well, and those on Zoom, we will be watching for questions in the chat. So now we will have the guest speakers give you a little background on themselves so you can be familiar, so that when we're getting more about their experiences, you can understand more about them.
So I graduated high school in 2009, and directly after my graduation, I decided to go into the Marine Corps. So I joined the Marine Corps in 2009, went to boot camp in San Diego, so I am known as a Hollywood Marine. They basically give us that title just because we go to boot camp right there in San Diego, which is downtown San Diego. So they say that we have a lot to look at, so therefore we're spoiled, which that's not really the case, but I'll take it. After the Marine Corps, I got out of the Marine Corps in 2014, and that's when I joined Ball State. And I started going for architecture, but then slowly realized that there was other things besides just architecture out there. So that is a little bit about me. I graduated, like I said, in 2014. Started at Fanning and Howey in 2019. And really, 4 months into the job, if I can tell you anything, be quick on your toes and be ready for change, because 4 months in, our senior landscape architect retired, and I became the department head. And they didn't look to hire anybody else because I guess I was doing a pretty good job at my job. So if anything, if I learned anything from that moment at all, is just be quick on your toes and be ready for change, and be confident in your abilities, because other people are going to see the work that you put out, and they're going to see that you actually know what you're talking about and you came from a reputable school. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Nice. So I'm gonna do mine over here, if that's all right. Present from the beginning. All right, yeah, so Denicia here again. I like visuals, so bear with me. I'm an urban planner, but I worked for a firm for maybe 2 months and just couldn't stand it, so I did another route. And that's why what you see here is called planning and abstraction, because I just wanted to showcase that there are other ways to use your skills and your talents and your education. So I'm an artist. That's what I do all the time. That's what brought me here. I went to school for civil engineering at first. That didn't work out. Had a terrible experience at a school I will not name because we're being recorded. But I transferred to the CAP program, and it was a saving grace. I tend to focus on housing and look at how we can bring people into owning and how we can make sure that those spaces reflect them, their culture, their background, their needs, their wants, their desires, etc. So that's kind of the foundation that I just wanted to share with you quickly. I'm doing this because as you get out into the world, and I'm sure you're studying it now, you're going to find that we as a community tend not to exist in spaces that are deemed high income, wealthy, safe, healthy, happy, right? Studies are showing that 70% of the spaces that we exist in, 70% of the predominantly black zip codes across the United States are what they consider distressed. And this is how distress is measured, right? So I can't stand that. As you go around the world, you'll see, especially here in the United States, that spaces like this, which are also cultural spaces, Little Tokyo, Chinatown, Little Havana, these are all like celebrated spaces. We like to go there, we like to shop, we like to be in those spaces. But black spaces are typically those spaces that are targeted and destroyed. Each of these spaces were predominantly black spaces, well-to-do, and each of them have been destroyed and turned over into something else. So that's kind of where I exist. How do we embolden black home ownership? How do we embolden black spaces? Again, all of these spaces, predominantly black spaces, and they also have a cultural lens to them. So I do that through a few different things. Land stewardship is one. A housing project where we rescued 10 houses on the south side of Indianapolis. Another housing project on the east side rescued 3 abandoned buildings. Each one of these is looking at how do you get artists and people of color to be in these spaces, to be activated in these spaces, to be giving their time, talent, and skills to these spaces. Also looking at cultural literacy as a way to embolden that same objective. So how do we bring black artistry, black thought, black creativity into the public sphere so that people can begin to see it every day in all of their commutes and all of their engagements, etc. It's a public library. So these were murals that happened, unfortunately, during the killing of George Floyd. Indianapolis shut down, murals went up all over the place. All of them were done by artists of color. After they came down, we also wanted to make sure that those works were still commemorated and archived. So they now exist in the public library. Anyone can have access to them. Looking at how do you do this also on the right-of-way, right? So how do we bring our culture, how do we bring our voice into more abstract spaces? Here are some examples of that. And again, through home ownership, which is what I started with. This is a project, ... means home, and all of the many ways that we as people of color, people of culture, and black people, how do we define home? What does it look like? What does it feel like? This is an experience that I've been going through with a community in the Philippines. They have black and Filipino community members. What does home look like to them? And then how do we begin to bring that into, again, the public right-of-way, the public sphere? So we're redesigning a home based on how they would design a home using their materials. And the last is through research and design. Working on a project now where we are cataloging all of the public art in Indianapolis. So we're doing a street-by-street analysis covering the entire county of Marion County and capturing all of the work that is there. The objective to understand, do we as people of color, do we as those who are marginalized, women, maybe you identify as queer, maybe you have a disability, but are you being reflected in the works, in the design of your public space? So, I'll stop there if you have any questions.
I could barely understand what I said when I first had the mic, so I had to take this mask off. But really, I mean, for me, it's kind of bittersweet to sit here right now because even just sitting here looking out at all of you and just allowing my mind to go back, you know, I'm just thinking about 2007, my first experiences being in this building and then even being in this room. And, you know, I'm grateful for all the things that have happened in my life that have helped me get to where I am now. Grateful to God. But at the same hand, you know, just sitting here thinking about when I first came to Ball State, you know, my lifelong dream was to be an architect. That was my first love, was actually drawing, sketching, drawing people, landscapes, drawing buildings, houses, really anything in the built environment. And then getting here to Ball State, you know, thinking my entire life that I was going to be an architect, I think that I had a crash course to reality. And having said that, coming into the program, the CAT program, in my first design studio, there was over 100 students, and only 3 of us were African American. Very few minorities in general. When I say minority, I mean ethnic minorities, black or brown people. But there were 3 African Americans. I was one of 2 African American males. We barely had any interactions at any point of that entire school year. And I just recall, you know, struggling really every day. One, to connect with my peers, to connect with my professors. It was really, I'll say, a miserable experience. And having said that, you know, after consulting with faculty members, I look at things differently now that I have more perspective than what I had when I was a, you know, 18-year-old kid, you know, failing at school. But I was really somewhat encouraged to pursue construction. And I did, and I'll say that that's been a very rewarding decision. Being a construction project manager, I've had the opportunity to travel the country and manage construction projects all across America. 15 different states I've been in managing construction projects, and that's an experience that I definitely don't take for granted. But at the same token, you know, just allowing my mind to go back, I always wonder what could have been had I been able to really, truly pursue and have a fair opportunity to pursue my first love. You understand what I'm saying? So having said this, one thing that I'm very passionate about is encouraging young people, encouraging students, particularly design students, one, to find your passion. And once you find your passion, don't let go of that. And it will definitely behoove you to connect to other individuals that, one, that are like you, and then other individuals that are not necessarily like you, but that mean well for you. So it doesn't have to be someone that looks like you, because I'll say that a lot of the things that I've benefited in my life, they've come from individuals that their skin doesn't look like mine, but they wanted the best for me. I've had great mentors in my life, great mentors where, you know, after the experiences that didn't go my way here in the CAT program, where I was going to walk away from design and almost walk away from construction as well, because after I graduated Ball State, you know, my first construction job, I went to one of the biggest construction firms in the state of Indiana, held that job for about 2 years, and it was really more of the same. And there's a theme in this, and I'll tell you what that theme is in a second. But after 2 years, I lost that job. And then I lost my next job and the job after that as well. So having said this, you know, I've definitely been through hardships, but one thing that I've understood, traveling the country from New York to Texas, East Coast, the South, Midwest, I mean, you name it. One thing that I've noticed is whether it's an engineer, an architect, any construction professional, for the most part, the building and design industry has suffered from the lack of representation when it comes to minorities, whether it be African Americans, whether it be women, Hispanics, Asians, indigenous, you name it. And that's one thing that I want to make sure that when I leave this industry, when I leave this earth, I want to make sure that I leave this industry a better place than I found it. And having said this, coming from Indianapolis, growing up in the inner city, within a household of 10, 7 brothers and sisters, only 1 working parent, growing up in poverty, you know, I know that this industry, the design industry, the construction industry, has changed my life. It's turned things around for me and my family. And I see nothing but opportunities where you go into urban communities, go into inner city neighborhoods all across the country, and you see hardship. You see lack of opportunity. And that's one thing that our industry can do, whether it be the design industry or the construction industry, that is to provide opportunities and better and improve the neighborhoods and the communities in which so many of us have grown up in, that so many of us still live in or are still connected to this day. So having said this, you know, coming up in construction took me 4 different employers before I landed in my 5th job, a company in Indianapolis that, you know, I stuck there for 5 years, and finally I found my footing. But I found my footing because I could lean on great mentors. I could lean on individuals that they didn't give up on me, or they didn't, you know, turn their back on me because things weren't working in my favor. That's something that will benefit each and every one of you, is finding great, strong mentors that are not necessarily going to tell you the things that you want to hear, but they'll tell you the things that you need to hear. So I've had great mentors. I've definitely had a great support system that has really held me down when I needed to be held down. So 5 years with my previous employer, I really found my footing and I found my passion. And I want to make this clear. Sometimes your passion is not necessarily what you think you're good at. You have to find your passion, you have to find and discover your calling. You can be good at a lot of things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's your passion. And my passion is definitely one, as I said, paving the way for individuals that came up the way that I came up. Paving the way for individuals that don't have it the way that some of us have it. That's my passion. And it doesn't have to be blacks. It could be whites, it could be Hispanics, or anyone that does not have the opportunities that so many others have. My passion is finding a way to connect our industries to those individuals and show them that they do actually have a future. They do actually have a path. They do have opportunities within this great industry that touches everybody all across the world. If you're a designer, if you're a construction professional, the things that we do, our profession, it touches and impacts everybody all across the world. And it always will until the end of the world. So that's my passion. I'm definitely fortunate now to be with Shield Sexton, which is really a byproduct of, you know, my passions, which is construction, but then also building the community, working in the community, volunteering my time, being a service to others, and finding a way, as I said, to bridge construction and building with also building people, building families, building young people, building young men. Those are my passions. So Shield Sexton, my current employer now, I mean, very grateful for that. Growing up, hearing the name Shield Sexton in Indianapolis, knowing that it was one of the biggest construction firms in the state, I never in 1,000 years thought that I would actually hold the position that I hold now. But I'm very grateful and I'm very thankful. But at the same hand, I always allow my mind to go back and remember when I was in some of you all's same shoes, the experiences that I had. And while I ultimately benefited in the long run, as I said, I still wonder what could have been. So I would encourage all of you, as I said, find your passion, find your calling, lean on strong mentorship, but also don't be so quick to give up. No matter how hard it is, don't be so quick to give up. That's what organizations such as NOMAS is for. It's providing you great contacts, great support, and great people that you can connect with and that will help keep you on a great path. So thank you for this opportunity.
Maya, we're ready for your background.
Am I up? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Yes, Maya, I'll make sure to speak loud. Can you hear me?
Yeah, a little bit. Could you allow me to share my screen? Okay.
Does that work?
Yes. Okay, well, I think that I have a really similar story to a lot of what we've heard today already, and probably a lot of you who are watching today. I actually grew up in a unique place, which is Oak Park, Illinois, and so I had this privilege of being like immediately exposed to architecture, and so no one necessarily needs to go out of their way to tell me about it, which I think is truly a privilege. And I came to Muncie in 2011 and started really looking around me in Muncie, but also around me in Chicago, and realizing all of the built injustice that exists all over our country and all over the world. And I started also thinking about, why I was feeling so uncomfortable in classes and why we were not talking about what I felt was, the most pressing issues in our society. Like, I think we talked a little bit about sustainability, but we weren't really talking about inequity in the built environment. And I saw that as a huge issue. And so I started working and very quickly realized that traditional practice was not going to work for me. And that was because of a lot of reasons, but a huge one was that I was constantly the only person of color in the room. And it felt really hard, and I feel like I struggled through both school and through traditional practice. And I worked at, I believe, 5 or 6 different firms, trying to figure out if I was going to be able to continue to practice in a traditional way. And then I ended up going back to grad school. I went to Boston Architectural College, which I could actually do mostly from Chicago, and I didn't need to move. It's an online program. And that was the first time I had really the time to sit down and collect all of these thoughts that I was having. It was the first time that I could kind of reflect on on the years prior to that, and how, I really started to think about how I wanted to practice architecture, and really how I wanted to start my career in a new way. And so for my thesis process, I did all of the development and research for what became Chicago Bubble Makers. I didn't know when I started grad school that I was going to start a nonprofit. I knew that I had all of these ideas swirling around. And so thesis was the first time that I really got to collect all of those thoughts and experiences. And I realized that I wanted to personally address all of those issues that I was seeing all around me. And so, what is Chicago Bubble Makers? It provides design and skill building workshops for youth with a focus on bringing opportunities to young people living in disinvested neighborhoods. So, what does that mean? That means that we provide workshops that have to do with design thinking and problem solving at the most basic level. And it means that everything that we do is hyper-local, and we're looking at sites that are not in a different country, that are not in a different state. They're literally down the street. And so in this case, we were looking right across the street from these kids' high school. And so we talk about community assets, we talk about healthy communities, we go out into communities and talk about how spaces and architecture make us feel. And so this is us on an observation walk where we're using all of our senses to kind of understand the world a little bit better. We do modeling. So this is our architecture-focused workshop where it's kind of the spanning young to older, but the kid on the left screen is probably 8. And if you recognize that building, I believe you guys still do a Chicago trip. This is on the IIT campus. It's their student center. It's been by Rep Coolhouse. It's probably one of the cutest models we've ever seen in our workshops. And then on the right are older students, and you can tell they're being much more meticulous about their model making. And then a huge part of our programs have to do with presentation. And so we're really trying to show young people that their voices are important and that they should be heard. And so if you recognize this person here, you should all know her. This is Amanda Williams. And I talked to her about through this whole workshop. And then she actually showed up at the end. And so part of the whole thing is getting important people in the room to hear what these kids have to say about their communities. Before the pandemic, we were like 90% in schools during school. And so really the point of this is that we're trying to be as accessible as possible. So in this classroom, these kids are already scheduled to be in the classroom. They didn't change their schedule, they didn't change anything about their day. We came to them and exposed them to design and architecture. We also do pop-ups. So this is a more recent pop-up at the, I'm blanking on the name, it's at a museum in Chicago. And we're talking all about how the Chicago fire really amplified inequities in Chicago when that happened. And these kids are thinking about how healthy communities are formed and built. In 2020, we built a truck. And so we bought a USPS truck that we converted into a mobile design studio. And so again, it's all about accessibility. We go out to communities and bring architecture to them. The point of that is that we're breaking down any barrier that could be between you and learning about design and architecture. This is a huge Juneteenth pop-up that we were involved in. And so this is really the truck in action. We always bring some kind of activity outside and engage people who walk around. We actually were kind of a mini art museum for this one. But this just shows that this is a parking lot. And we really love the idea of activating space that is underutilized. We're here to support young people and impact change. And very soon, we've been waiting for a long time. I think all of you know about just like the ridiculous delays going on in construction, but we are opening our first permanent space in the spring, as long as our build-out goes well. The point of this is that we're going to do all of our out-of-school workshops in this space, and so that means we'll do design, architecture, digital fab, and construction workshops in here, but then we'll still be going out with the truck and doing pop-ups, and then as soon as we can, we'll be back in schools as well. And really quickly, these are just some really exciting things that have happened in the last couple of years. The pandemic has been really hard, but it's also been just a huge growth period for us. The latest thing that happened is that we got a grant from the NBA and the Bulls. That's me up on the Jumbotron, which was wild. But this grant is going to help us build up our space this winter, which is really, really exciting. We didn't know when we were going to be able to do it until we got this grant. Here's a cute picture. And this world will not be equal until it is built by and for all. There's my contact, which I can share later as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. You can hear me now, correct?
Will you repeat that? It's a little bit hard to hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now Olin's going to make another acknowledgement.
Yeah, so thank you all. Am I on? Yeah, thank you all again for your wonderful talks, and we'll get into some more detail here. But I was listening to all this important topics that were introduced and thinking about what Adrian had to say in particular, and the fact that it's important to have allies. We got to have allies. We saw allies in 2020 on our streets, right, all over the country, and it made me think about an ally, a friend of mine, who understands these challenges that we're facing. And now that we've merged with construction management and interior design, he's from our former technology program, and he's offered a scholarship primarily targeted to students of color and underrepresented groups, with an emphasis on women in practice in these programs, and that is Mr. Jim Barnes. I just wanted to acknowledge Jim while he's here. We're in the third year of that scholarship, and we hope that it'll continue into perpetuity as we try to support people like you're seeing tonight in this program. I just want to thank you again, Jim.
So they need to apply before spring break.
Look for the Jim Barnes Scholarship in our website. Thank you.
So the question I'd like to start with for you all is, how did you know you wanted to be a designer? If you could go into detail about that first time you fell in love with design.
So this is a little hard question for me, and I have to kind of go back, so I apologize ahead of time to fully get the full picture. So I'm from Haiti. I'm not originally from the United States. I was adopted at 4 years old from Haiti. I'm actually from Savadier, Haiti. Myself and my brother got adopted at the same time. So if anybody is familiar with Haiti, Haiti is a very deprived country, third world country to the full definition. Even more so when I was adopted because they were going through the embargo at that time. So my adoption was very quick, very abrupt. I kind of got yanked from what I knew as normalcy in life in general, very, very quick at a very young age. A little bit about Haiti. Haiti, you will not go there and see any buildings like this, for sure. You are not going to see a facility that has a 3-story type of enclosure like this. You're not going to see a lot of, wood or other building material besides concrete, because Haiti is a very, it's on a, it has a lot of earthquakes. It has a lot of earthquakes, a lot of natural disasters. So you're not seeing anything higher than 2 stories, if that. And if you do, you're not seeing anything of well-built construction. You're definitely not seeing skyscrapers. Sorry, I can't speak right now. So when I got adopted, I flew in from Indianapolis, and it was during the time when you had to actually walk from the airport to the terminal. I don't know if some of you actually remember some of that, but you didn't just pull up right to the gate. So this is the middle of January, 4 years old, frail as can be, and stepping off of the airplane. The first thing that hits me is the cold, because I've never experienced cold ever in my life, and it's middle of winter. And the first thing that I see is at the old Indianapolis airport. So if you're familiar with that, it was a little bit closer to downtown. So right when you come off of the taxi runway, you are staring at a skyscraper line. So just imagine this at 4 years old as a kid, let alone never seeing snow, never seeing anything above 2 stories, never seeing anything besides concrete buildings, let alone that. I only saw concrete buildings when I went to Port-au-Prince, the major city that I flew out of. Besides that, you're seeing mud huts and palm leaf huts, all right? And now I've just flown into this this huge city that I never even knew existed. So when I first saw that as a kid, my mind kind of just unraveled right there and then. I'm sorry, it's hard for me not to get emotional. Because you gotta understand, this is generations of my family that has never ever seen anything like that, witnessed any of that, never knew that was possible. And here I am at 4 years old, and I'm seeing this for the first time. It was gorgeous. I'm freezing, I don't know what I'm looking at. But it was brighter than where I was coming from. People were chaos. It was chaos out of the airport there. I remember at 4 years old, I still remember this. People running, screaming, trying to grab stuff out of their bags. People leaving the airports because they can't get on flights because they're getting turned away. This is an embargo situation. Haiti is closing down. If you can't get out now, you're not getting out. So I was lucky to get out with a missionary, and seeing these buildings for the first time, seeing an airport, seeing planes for the first time, roaring past me, what I think is roaring past me. It's taxi, it's slow. But 4 years old, I'm overwhelmed. And once we got out of the airport and went to Taco Bell for the first time, and sitting there, and they're putting this taco in front of me, and I've never eaten a taco. I don't know what this is. I instantly get sick because, you know, my body's not used to this. I'm malnourished, red hair, pot belly, haven't eaten that much food ever in my life. So it's like, it's just all culture shock. So right there, afterwards, I saw that so much was possible. So growing up and going to middle school, elementary, and high school later on, and seeing all this architecture around me, just, I don't know, I fell in love instantly. Just because when you see something for the first time, it opens your mind to see everything that is possible. Everything that you thought that wasn't possible, that you didn't even see was a possibility, is now before you. So that right there, I think it was that moment that solidified. And in that moment, I didn't know I was going to be an architect. I didn't know that I loved architecture. But thinking back through all the times when I landed on the moment of, oh man, I think I might go into art for my profession. It was all from that moment of seeing art in practice, seeing it right there for the first time. That truly just opened my mind to the possibilities. And from that day on, I kind of just slowly was getting tugged towards architecture without even realizing it. And then in high school, they started this first program. It was AEC, Architecture, Engineering, and I think it was actually AEC, it was construction. And it was that class that they showed me Revit, and I was like, wow. And I kind of taught the instructor how to use Revit because I kind of just ran with it. And why did I run with it? Is because the passion that I had from that first day when I saw a building, and I was like, this is so intricate and so gorgeous and tall, and it, like the human scale, we talk about that so much here, that the human scale value has to just be right. But honestly, I don't even think that in that moment, the human scale even mattered to me. It could have been 100 times bigger than me, and even off of scale, and it's just still something of that magnitude that we have the ability to erect or make, even just a simple park. It's just mind-blowing to people that don't have it. So that right there, that drove me to give that to others, is that possibility, that future of seeing something that they never seen before. If that helps. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Okay, perfect.
That was lovely. So I don't know about y'all. I'm over here like, I don't know how formal this needs to be, but you know, this is like we're family here, so feel free to, if you need to. But, I think mine is similar but flipped. So I grew up in the Midwest and also in the Caribbean. And growing up in the Midwest is just wide open plains. It's very boring and dull. And what I shared in my presentation is that I'm constantly looking for ways to bring the Black voice and the Black eye to things creatively. Because I didn't see that living in Indiana. I didn't see that even growing up in Tennessee. But when I left and I was growing up in Costa Rica and in Ecuador, you start to see that. You start to see that culture is imprinted onto buildings. It's also imprinted onto landscapes. Spaces are designed for people to interact with one another, because that's the most important thing to your survival, both physically and spiritually. And you see that in whether it's the motif that is carved into a facade, or the way that a streetscape is laid out because they want you to bump into your neighbor. But ethnic cultural practices are influenced by the way spaces are put together. And I love that, and I thought that was just so special. And so going back and forth, I just started to see the stark contrast. Why is this not existing here in the Midwest when I am existing in predominantly Black spaces? But it is when I'm in these other types of communities. And it wasn't until I got older and I came to, did civil engineering, and I was like, oh, okay, that's not it. That's not gonna work. That's not gonna get me what I want to do. And I came here and started doing planning, and I felt like I had the freedom to start to design what I was feeling, Unfortunately, there were some professors here at the time who were not, they just didn't have the language to support that. But ultimately, my objective was to, one, encourage others to make sure that their spaces felt like what they were, felt like what they needed it to be. But now as I've practiced more and more, and I have a new set of tools, I have new language to both speak and see with, I've also come to find that the spaces I was existing in here, in Tennessee and in Indiana, they had the same thing. They were on a much smaller scale because we inherited our spaces, right? We weren't building our homes. We were adopting buildings, apartment complexes, housing additions that were already built without us in mind. But one thing that I noticed is that we are creatures of innovation. And so we're constantly putting things in place that we need to have in place, right? You're gonna find a cow path somewhere because that's the best way to do it, or you're gonna find kind of an impromptu gathering space where someone has brought a barbecue pit and 5 chairs and it stays there and nobody steals it because that's where we want community to happen. You're gonna find some kind of a playground that is misshapen, or some kind of art that someone has just created because we're trying constantly to bring these things to our spaces. And so now that I understand both things are happening, that's what draws me to design every day. Is I want to make sure that I'm living in a space that reflects me, and I also want others to feel like they're living in a space that reflects them. So yeah.
By a show of hand, how many of you grew up in church? When I say in church, I mean going to church, around church. Okay, so most of us. So I'm 33 now. Times are a little different now than what they used to be, but my dad was a deacon in church. His dad was a deacon, my mom. My family is just a very religious family. So most of my childhood was spent in church, whether we wanted to be there or not. And I mean multiple days of the week, all days on Sunday. So being stuck in church most of my childhood, I can't even remember what age, but going to church on the inner city of Indianapolis, our church was pretty cool. Where it's an old limestone building built in the 40s. Pretty big, cool building. Pretty dilapidated coming up, but that's beside the point. So being stuck in church, I had a group of friends where coming up, we were pretty bad. So while we were in church, we would do everything that we weren't supposed to do. So, from wrestling to fake shouting and doing all types of just stupid stuff. It was pretty crazy. So we would be there so long that sometimes we would get tired. And after we did everything that we weren't supposed to do, then we would just, get some paper, pencils, and just draw things. And this is when I was a young kid. I can't even remember what age. And there were giant murals on the wall at our church coming up, like massive murals on the wall at the front of the church. And for whatever reason, there was one mural of Jesus, and it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. And for whatever reason, we liked to draw this mural of Jesus. We would sit there and we would all try to draw it, and we would laugh at how bad it looked. So for whatever reason, us just being bad kids, we wanted to draw the bad mural of Jesus. So at some point in time, doing that as a kid, it kind of became competitive, where for whatever reason, every week we would try to draw this mural, and then we'd pass along the road to see whose was the best. And I had a cousin where he was an amazing, artist. He could sketch really well, he could draw really well. And for whatever reason, they would always say that his was the best, and I started to get jealous. So not only was I practicing trying to draw this mural of Jesus better, but then at one point, to try to outdo him, what I did was I didn't just draw Jesus, the mural, but then I drew the things that were around it as well. So then I started sketching, the drummer and the organist underneath. Then one point in time, I started sketching us looking up, drawing Jesus. And I remember that my friends, and it touches me because I remember that at one point in time, they started to think what I was doing was pretty cool or dope. It was like, man, look at this, that's the drummer. And they were actually appreciating the fact that not only was I drawing that up on the wall, but I was actually trying to draw the things around it as well. And getting some of that acclaim or that praise from them, that kind of touched me and inspired me. So for me, when I think back on what first inspired me or what first encouraged me to want to go into architecture is really just being a bad kid coming up in church with nothing else to do but just trying to draw Jesus. And then not just drawing Jesus, but drawing the things around him. And then from there, you know, coming up and getting older, one thing led to another, which led to another. And I just loved, as I said earlier, just drawing the built environment, drawing people, drawing houses, things that we all, you know, experience every day. But it was all inspired by the Jesus mural. So shout out to Jesus.
Maya? Turn over to Maya.
You guys went way back. Again, I grew up in Oak Park, which was really strange. I mean, it was a strange upbringing. You know, it was a lot of fun, but like everything, even to this day, revolves around Frank Lloyd Wright. And so, obviously, we have all of the houses here, but it's also like part of Oak Park's like branding and logo, and people will like use these different fonts that look like prairie style fonts for their business names. And so it's just everywhere. And even when I was a little kid, you know, I definitely did architecture camps when I was young, just because that was normal here. But like I played with, it went so far that I played with foible blocks, which were like the things that like Frank Lloyd Wright were inspired by, which is, it's a weird thing. And another weird thing was that like people were constantly coming to Oak Park to see Frank Lloyd Wright buildings, and so there would be walking tours all around. You would always see people clearly from like different countries coming into Oak Park, and of course the people here and like me and my friends in middle school and high school are like laughing at these people and joking around and wondering why so many people are coming here. And you know, I actually just moved back to Oak Park recently, and I like casually passed Unity Temple, and it's funny how you kind of are desensitized to it when you're just seeing it all the time. And it was really awkward for me when we went on our Chicago trip because we came to Oak Park, and so I like refused. I remember specifically having this sketch session in front of the studio, and I like refused to sketch it because I was like, I'm not gonna do this, like I live here. And so I think obviously design and architecture were just around me all the time, and so subconsciously that had to have something to do with me going into architecture. But I can't say that I knew until much later. So I know that I was creative. I liked drawing when I was a kid. We played with Legos all the time. But I don't think I actually knew that I wanted to be an architect until I went to the Ball State summer camp. And that's when I was a junior in high school. And so to me, that's just another way where I feel like that had such a huge impact on me to go do this really specific experience in high school, which obviously has to do with like why I thought that starting people young in architecture is really important. But yeah, I knew that I liked to design, kind of, but I didn't really know what design was until I went to that camp. Something that I did a lot was someone showed me Dwell at some point, and I would go through Dwell and try to sketch houses. And so I know that that was one of the first things that I started to do when I started to get into design. But that high school camp was really pivotal for me to really decide that architecture was the way to go. And I specifically remember this thought that I had during that camp, which was like, it feels like we're just doing like arts and crafts. Like we were doing studio basically, and it felt like we were just playing. And that's how I knew that like this was something that really gelled with me, even though I didn't exactly know what practice meant or what you would do after college. The idea of studio was really that really gravitated. I gravitated towards sort of the studio environment, I think.
All right.
And it seems that those on Zoom cannot hear our microphone so well, so we will continue to use it and try to speak up. But I would like to ask Ernzo or any guest speaker who's talking first to repeat the question so those on Zoom can hear.
Okay.
Can you guys tell us how has your race or gender or any like marginalized identity impacted the way you do your design work in the field and in the profession?
So the question is, how does my ethnic role and my ethnicity and basically just my gender play within the way that I design and the way that I approach design? I think that's a good question. So as you guys know, Fannie and Howell, we design K through 12 and higher education facilities. I very much specialize in athletic design. Within athletic design, there's not a lot of room to go outside of the realms of what is a standard design for a field or for a layout or something like that, right? Beyond the graphics. I mean, graphics, you can go a little bit deeper and put in some of that culture and some of that history for the schools within whatever product that I'm providing for them. So really when it comes down to design, I really don't implement a lot of my ethnicity within my designs. The way that I really give back and use my ethnicity is by being that figure that's going onto the campus that I'm working for and the owners that I'm working for, and being that positive role model and figure that these kids and these students, that these younger age groups are seeing. And I mean, you won't believe how many looks that I get from minority students when I'm walking through their schools and they see me dressed the way that I am, carrying myself the way that I am, holding most of the time drawings underneath my arm, and they ask questions. That is what inspires me to do the job that I'm doing. I have a mentorship program that I've started in 2019 that really aims and focuses at educating students and kids about architecture, and not even just that, but majorities. A lot of people look at the minorities and we have to counsel and mentor them. Yes, we do. We need to mentor our own, but at the same time, we have to mentor, the majority populations as well, the whites and all those people. Because why? Because those are the people that, in the end of the day, we all have to live together. So they have to understand how to accept us, how to live with us, what makes us tick, what we like and how we design, So many kids, I realize that they don't have the opportunity to meet a lot of minorities. I grew up in a very, Caucasian, white neighborhood oriented area. I grew up in Hamilton Heights. I mean, that's as rural as you can possibly get within Hamilton County, besides going, to Tipton. So I grew up in a white home. I was adopted, so I was primarily around white culture. So I wasn't able to connect with my race when growing up. So I was that kid that was on the side that I didn't belong with the whites, and I didn't belong with the minority blacks. I didn't. I really was an unidentified person in a sense. Like, I really didn't have a place. So I really don't use my ethnicity or, my gender within my design. I just use it for more so when I go out on these job sites and at these schools. So many times I've had the opportunity to just go back and talk to the kids. So many times I've had parents come up to me and ask me about my mentorship program and ask me to mentor their kid. And it's not just mentoring on, education or anything, it's just life in general. I go and have moments where, we have organized and unstructured learning moments where, I will teach them some things about landscape architecture. Or I will teach them, just about life, or I'll just go and we'll play a game or something. But it's just the interaction all the time with, the minority side. Teaches them the importance of inclusion. And that's really what I try to bring within my profession, within landscape architecture, is all those schools that I go to, I just want to be that image and that person that those kids can come to. So many times when I saw an architect, I only saw a Caucasian architect. I'm never, growing up, I couldn't tell you that I saw a minority architect. So it's just, especially in my school that I came from, Hamilton Heights. So it's just, when I go back to those places now, I'm starting to see a lot more minorities within those schools. And I'm starting to see a lot of them now, their eyes are kind of just like popping out of their heads when they see me. It's like, wow, this is possible? This is, especially once they ask me, what do you do? And I say, I'm a landscape architect. They're like, wait, what is that? And then when I tell them, they're like, that's a thing and we do that? Like, we do that? And I'm just like, yes, we can do anything and everything. But, so yeah, I mean, like, whenever I get a chance and I try to implement a little bit of myself into my projects, I do. But within my realm, it's all about the owner. It's all about what the owner wants. It's all about the end user. And I have to always, and not just myself, Fannie Howie, we try to design facilities for the future students. We design future facilities for the future generation. And that's really what I have in mind, is just going to those future generations that I'm designing for, and just being that model that they can look at and that they can ask and that I can share my experiences with, and just show them that it's possible. Show them that it exists, really.
How do I use my ethnicity, gender in my role? So I work on the margins. Because I don't work with a firm or a city, I get to be much more flexible, which is perfect for me. Oh, sorry. Can you all hear me okay? Okay. No? They can't hear on the Zoom? Give me 1 second.
No.
Gotcha. All right, how about now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Mic check. One, two. I can't spit, so I'm not gonna try.
I used to think I couldn't spit, and then Jerron taught me.
Encourage you to do so. Can y'all hear me? Okay. Yes, no?
Just saying yes, no.
Yes, no. Okay. Okay. All right. So yeah, because I work on the margins, I get to be flexible and nimble, and I appreciate that in my practice. I tend to work with cities, I work with institutions, but I'm not bound by any of their protocols or practices, which is great for me. But I think I impart my identity, I'll say, into what I do, and not to pick on you or anyone here, but I don't use the term minority. As you probably heard me in my talk, I use people of color, people of culture, the global majority, a lot of times when I'm giving any kind of presentation, because in reality, we are the global majority. The myth is that we are minor, that we are diminished, that we are marginalized. And so that's typically how I go into every practice, project, endeavor, activity that I'm doing, is looking at who is being served and bringing them to the forefront every single time. My gender, same sort of thing, you know. I think because I'm a woman, I get to ask different questions in a different way than men do in specific rooms, and I try and use that as an advantage. But I'm sure there's a multitude of ways, but those are the two key. Is one, recognizing that I have a particular power being a woman of color, and speaking that from the very beginning of the conversation, regardless of who I'm working with. So.
That was very well said. And of course, me not being a designer, but being a builder who works with designers, I would really just follow that up and keep it very simple by saying that I'm always mindful of who I am and where I come from. And I know that for so many that come from my community, thinking about kids, I mean, because youth are our future, you're our future. You know, you go into my neighborhood, you could ask a kid, what is an architect? I guarantee you most of them have no idea what an architect even is. You ask them what is an engineer, they might know what that is, But once you actually get into, the technicalities, say a civil engineer or a landscape architect, they would have no clue what that is. So for me, I'm always mindful of the fact that when I was coming up, a lot of these professions, a lot of these disciplines, they were foreign to us. So I'm always mindful of who I am, where I come from, where I'm representing my neighborhood, I'm representing my community, I'm representing those that look like me, that feel like me, that think like me, that have experienced life similar to me. So having said this, we're always leaving an impression on our counterparts, whoever they may be. So I'm representing where I come from and who I am, knowing that if these individuals were given the same opportunities, they could change this world as well. They could reshape this world as well. So I'm always mindful of that in any setting, whether I'm working with builders, architects, engineers, owners, state representatives, local officials, you name it. I'm always representing those that look like me and that have experienced life similar to me, knowing that we had those same opportunities, what would be?
I'm gonna add one thing. I like this question. I know we're on a timeline, so I don't want to belabor it any, but there's a lot of adults who don't know what a planner is, right? Like, you might get to a specific age and folks recognize an architect off the bat, but the other day, again, we black, I was getting my hair done, because that's what we do. And the woman asked me what I do for a living, and I told her I'm an urban planner. She didn't know what that was, right? So we're constantly educating ourselves about what this world is. I would just encourage you to continue to practice grace, right? And just remember, we're learning from each other all the time.
Really quickly, I think that my race and gender have fully shaped, everything about how I practice today. And I will put this out there, I'm also an adoptee. It's funny, usually you don't have two necessarily on the same panel. But I think it's really important to talk about, practice and working in a field or working in a firm. And I think that really had a huge impact on kind of the way that my life has maybe pivoted from what I thought it would be when I was in school. And that all has to do with race and gender. And so I think it's important to talk about the struggles or challenges that young people might face as they start working in the field, especially if you're working in an organization that is mostly white or mostly white male. It's really important that I think a lot of us have already talked about networks and support systems. Those are so important, and sticking with NOMAS is really important so you have that support system around you when things might get a little bit tough. And I feel like it's important for me to be straight up about how I got to this point, and that is really that I had some not so great experiences working at firms that were largely white organizations. And I thought when I was coming out of school that I was just going to follow the traditional path. I was going to get my license. Like I was doing exactly what I was told to do when I was in school. But really the reason that I started my nonprofit was to kind of try to carve out a space for myself that felt more safe and more supportive. And I think it's, this is not to be a bummer, but it's really important to know, have a support system and know people that can mentor you and support you through different situations that you may face in the workforce.
All right.
Sorry, my question would be, how do you guys, or how would you recommend young designers deal with adversity growing up and dealing with challenges that they may go through as they, develop into professionals.
So how to deal with with just change and pressure. I honestly feel that, I don't know, like I said, I grew up in a very predominantly white area, and my whole entire family was, besides my sisters were actually adopted with me a year after. I was blessed with that. My brother got adopted the same time as I did, but to the missionaries family. So I feel like we keep talking about having that team around you, the support around you. I think that is even more important within this question, is how did I deal with it, is from all those other people around me. It wasn't so much that I was dealing with it, it was so much that I was leaning on other people. I think so much that we talk about, the struggle of, African Americans making it within any department or within any job, but honestly, out of all my experiences, yes. Do you go through and you have those micro expressions that you feel? Do you have some of those slight insults that you pick up on? Well, yes, but who doesn't, right? I mean, I guarantee you, anybody, even non-minorities or anybody, can say that in a day that you've had people that were rude to you, or that were condescending, or anything. How does anybody put up with that, right? I mean, half the time it's because you're talking and relying on other people, right, to get and to relieve some of that stress and those emotions that you're feeling. That's exactly how I did. When I was going through this program, I relied on the professors more than anybody in this building. I was always at a professor or even just a colleague's desk, just talking to them. Why? Because those are the people that were trying to get me through. I did not connect with anybody within my studio. I didn't. Why? Because I was a non-traditional student. I just came from the military. All that stuff that I went through that I was still trying to deal with emotionally from just that. Now I have to deal with school and all the other underlying things that we're talking about, So it was a lot. I couldn't deal with that by myself. I wasn't. I was having panic attacks my first year and stuff like that because I was trying to deal with it all myself. And then I quickly learned that's not the way to do it. It's to lean on those people that are near you, even if they're not close. You can only find close people by testing the waters and searching out. And that's what the biggest thing that I would encourage is just to search out for those people that you can rely upon, and you will quickly learn who you can and can't rely on. But your professors are a huge asset, and I'll say that. Like, I know some people have had some bad stories about professors, or they've had left a bad taste in their mouth. But through this program, that's what got me through this, because there was times I was going to pull out just because of the class that I was in. I was the only minority in it. I was the only black in it. There was nobody else, So yeah, I felt very secluded and lonely in a lot of those areas in those times. But, professors were always there saying, you're doing great work. You're showing up. You're doing what it takes. You're leaving a little bit of yourself in these projects. And that's really what got me through is going to them, is talking to them. It's getting that reassurance that you're on the right track. You're putting in the hard work, and that's really what it is. Just put in the hard work and lean on the people that you can lean on, and they're really going to help you and get through this program. There were so many times I was going to pull out of this program. So many times, my sophomore year, my junior year, when I got my major accident with my leg. So it was just a lot of things that were stacking up, and honestly, that's the only way that I got through. It wasn't because of me. It was because of all the other people that I kind of built around me within those 5 years that were just kind of like, you got this. I mean, you'll do just fine. Just get through this. So I just highly recommend a team around you will help you succeed. Will help you succeed.
I concur with that. I think definitely having a support team is valuable. My suggestion for dealing with diversity is a bit more internal. One of the best quotes to me, in my opinion, is Bruce Lee, "Be like water." It's going one direction. It knows where it's going. but it can pivot at any point, and it's still going that one direction. So I think it's be flexible, but also know yourself. Be confident in what it is that you want to do, and continue moving in that direction. But if you need to go left, go left. If you need to go right, but you're still going forward.
No, I think the answer was for me perfectly.
Maya, you heard the question?
Yeah, I think that I mostly answered it already, but I think something important that I wish that I knew about adversity is that sometimes your firm is not going to change, and you have to figure out when is that right time to leave and find a place that's going to support you more. Because I think when we go to our first job, we think it's like the only job in the world. And like when I started, I was like, this is full time in my field. I need to stay here forever. And that's not the case. There are lots of jobs out there. And so if you feel like nothing is changing for you, start looking. And there's no reason to stay any place that's not supporting you or not serving you more than you need to. And so it's a good idea to just start looking elsewhere.
I would like to add one thing. That is a great point, but at the same time, you also got to remember that being the odd person out sets you up for opportunities. And I'll stress that again. Stressful times can set you up for great opportunities. I did not ask for my job. I did not apply for my job. I already had a job in Chicago. This job landed in my lap. They contacted me for an interview. God sent me this job. And when I took this job, they promoted me as soon as I got the job. Why? Because somebody was already on the way out. So it's just like, and even though that I'm the only face, African American face within my company, within our office, not just with the whole company, within our office, I could have left because I was underrepresented, and I didn't feel that I had other people like-minded that I could bounce off from and get some encouragement from. But at the same time, I saw an opportunity to bring that to this office, an opportunity for me to grow because it's a stressful area. It's something that I'm not used to. Yet I am used to it because everywhere that I kind of went, I was almost a token. But at the same time, this is a new opportunity to create something that I want to see happen. So don't always shy away because you're the odd person out. That could be the opportunity that you need to bring what you're seeking to that area. So look for both. If it's uncomfortable and you can't bear it, of course, look for something else. But if it's just something that you feel pressure, well, that pressure might be good. It might force you to grow. It might force you to develop something that you have seen but haven't actually truly found. There's
a big difference between pain and abuse.
Yes.
Right? A very big difference.
There's a big difference between pain and abuse. And I have a follow-up question. So one of the things we see in PATH in particular is that, we as students, we want to perform our best, we're pulling all-nighters and all these things and making sure that our work is top tier, especially for those of us who have to work 10 times harder than our peers. But how do you transition into a work-life balance, right? Because when you're working, those unbillable hours may exist, but you don't want work to consume you as much as it did in school. So could you guys talk about that kind of balance that you have now?
Well, I'm sorry, before we move on to that question, I just want to kind of chime in on what they were saying. I definitely am not a professional, but I can say that I struggle with allowing people, I struggle with leaning on people. I have historically struggled with leaning on people. I don't know, some students might go through that, but when you feel like you can't lean on somebody else, it's always good to write down, find other habits to get it out. You have to relieve that pressure in some way, shape, or form, or you'll pop, you know. You'll have a panic attack, you'll have anxiety attacks. So, but it definitely is great to find those people you can lean on.
And then also, I can't stress it enough, we in NOMAS are a family and we lean on each other. And many times I've been stressed and I come in 5 p.m., AB 310, and we just play a game to warm up. So we're here for y'all, anybody that needs a place to chill or relax from your work. And the question once again is how you balance that course load or workload.
Well, sorry to let you guys know, but it doesn't get easier once you get out. If anything, it gets a little bit harder. Just because, I mean, at school, you have school and then you have your personal time, right? That's really what it is. You have your projects and then you can leave and go back and you have your apartment or your dorm room, and that's really it. I mean, you're in Muncie, Indiana. Let's be real. There's not a lot to do here, right? Well, wherever you move to and you get your job, it's going to be even harder, because the fact is you have now things that you want to go do, plus you have things that you don't really want to do, which is called your work, or you do really want to do it because you're passionate about it, right? I'm passionate about my job, so right now, especially with COVID, things have kind of changed. Your work-life balance kind of had to take a pivot, like you were talking about. You have to be as lucid as water. You have to be prepared to pivot and change. And that's one thing that I learned within my profession is work doesn't really ever stop. Just kind of like how your projects don't ever really stop here. Here you have 4 weeks or so to get a project done, and once you get done with that project, you move on to the next one, right? Your professors always say, hey, you know, you should go back and look at those old pet projects and kind of revitalize those projects and redo them, you know? But how many of you guys really go and do that, you know? Let's be honest. A lot of us probably don't. It's just, you know, on to the next, and I'll take those things that I learned from that project and apply it to the next. Well, within the professional world, I mean, you have projects that might be around for a whole entire year or 2 years in all different phases. So, and you're juggling other projects now that have come onto your plate that is in a whole new space. So, my whole thing is, how do I balance it? I balance it because I remember myself first. And that's where I feel like everybody needs to kind of do, especially when you become a professional. Remember the things that made you happy. Remember the things that you were striving for to become a professional, right? We all just didn't want to become professionals just for the work. We wanted to become professionals because of what? Because of the opportunities that it presents. You know, travel. Why are we all architects? Because we love architecture, we love the site world, the built world. So, I mean, I feel like the best way to prioritize and to keep myself level is to plan out specific times for me to actually enjoy some of those things that I like to enjoy. But at the same time, I also keep a realistic mind and know that my job is always going to be there on a 24/7 basis, in the sense that I'm always going to be working on something, you know? Like, I might answer an email here for an hour, all emails, and then take a break and do something personal, and then I'll go back and do something for work, and vice versa. You just got to be flexible and be able to juggle a lot of different things at the same time, as I would say. Especially if you're going to be not just a CAD drafts person, right? If you're going to actually hold a position within a firm, you're going to have to be available. I wouldn't say it's 24/7, but you really got to be available for 12 hours out of the day and be okay with that. And the only way that you can get there is by mastering now, while you're in college, that work ethic that is nonstop, but at the same time, you know that I have to take personal time, and you have to implement that personal time. Because so many architects forget to eat, forget to drink water, right? Decline of health. You can't let that. You have to think about yourself first, and then think about your work, all right? Because your work is always going to be there. Yourself, you can lose that. You can lose yourself if you let yourself lose yourself, and work is still going to be there. So work will always be there, but just don't forget about yourself, all right? Do the things that make you happy and set out the time to do those things. It's my suggestion. That's how I manage my time and manage my personal time, and still keep a sane mind doing the job that we do, because It doesn't get easier, guys. It gets harder. Right now, let's be realistic. I have 25 projects in all different phases. Just had a phone call right now. I'm sure that's about a project. But you know what? I'm prioritizing my time. This takes priority right now. Why? Because I'm trying to give back to you guys, because this place gave back so much to me, right? I'll just have to take an hour or 2 hours out of my later free time to do work, right? You gotta be adult, right? Sometimes I gotta do work when I don't wanna do work, and sometimes I gotta take some of that free time that I was gonna have and take it away because of this, this is my free time right now. I'm doing this, so later on I'll do work. But it's just a give and take. Just learn that give and take and you'll be perfectly fine.
For me, I'll be honest that I mentioned earlier finding your passion, and I'm very passionate about what I do, and I love what I do. So much what I do, I don't even think of it as work per se. I just think of it as I'm doing what I love and I want to do it. And more often than not, most days, I look forward to what I'm going to do. It hasn't always been that way, but I've been fortunate enough and blessed to find where I found a passion and an outlet to do the things that I love to do. So for me, a work-life balance, to be honest with you, I don't think of that much. I just think of the fact that I love to do what I want to do. I'm passionate about what I do. I'm passionate about this industry. I'm passionate about building. I'm passionate about design, and I'm always excited to have the opportunity to do it because it's what I dreamed of doing, and I'm happy that I really achieved my dream and I get to experience it every day. That's just the honest truth.
So I'm an independent contractor, so everything is work all the time. But I would just encourage you to find your flow, find your rhythm, whatever that might be. I like kickboxing, I like swimming, I like gardening. So I found a way to build those into my weekly routine, no matter what. But because I work all the time, because I have so many projects, right? I think I don't have 25, but I think I'm pushing it right about now. I set up a routine for myself. So every odd month, I travel. That's the thing I need for my release, so I have made it a priority. It doesn't take away from my work, because even while I'm traveling, I'm doing work. I'm looking at, I'm experiencing, I'm researching, I'm investigating. But just build in what it is that you need for your self-care, for your self-love, whatever that might be.
Maya?
I am all for pushing back at your bosses and really setting your own boundaries for your time, because your time is precious. And so I think when you're working in your firm, it's really hard because everything is going to be dictated. Your time is dictated by other people. But it's so important to have those values and boundaries set when you're starting to do work at firms, so that you can have a little bit more power over your time. I wouldn't say that I did that very well when I started working, and I didn't really feel like I had control over my life. And that's why I started thinking about going off on my own. But that is also really hard. And so I was working full-time and doing Chicago Remembers on the side for a while. Then I was doing it half and half. But while I was doing it half and half, I usually had 2 to 4 jobs at a time. And so I had no work-life balance for years after school. And I'm not condoning this at all. It's not a great time. But now I'm at the kind of on the other side of things. Where it took about, Chicago Remembers has been open for 4 years. And this past August, I finally became a full-time team member of my own company. And so if you are deciding to create your own firm, or you're doing, again, you're an independent contractor, or you're trying to do things kind of separately from the traditional firms, then it might take a little bit to get your footing, but I think work-life balance can be achieved, and it should be an absolute, like, #1 priority, because, you know, life is not just work, and there's so much else that is a part of life. And I think, what's that cheesy saying? It's like, you either work to live or live to work. And so really decide what you're trying to do and be really intentional as you go through your journeys.
We'd now like to open it up to any questions from the crowd or the Zoom. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, Celeste.
Can you guys hear me?
I'll repeat the question when I hear it from you.
Okay. I wanted to know if there was a moment in your guys' career or during school where you guys felt doubt about being in design, and how did you guys overcome that doubt or that fear?
The question was if there was ever a time that you doubted your career choice, how you overcame that fear.
Oh, wow. Yeah, like I said, I think my sophomore and junior year, both of those years were pretty hard. I was going through a lot of personal things, through just dealing with stuff still through from the military, getting over injuries from the military, and just getting back into the swing of just civilian life in general. Getting reclimatized and acclimated to the civilian life after the military is, wow. I've heard people compare it to, people that that had drug overdoses and stuff like that, or struggle with alcoholism and stuff like that. I know that's very extreme, but it's a totally different kind of lifestyle going from the military to the civilian world, especially doing the job that I did. So it was just a lot of self-doubt of, am I smart enough, especially because at that time, I think I was 26 or so. So I'm going to school with a bunch of, your guys' age, 18, 19. You guys have, developed fast when it comes to your guys' mental capabilities. When I was in high school, you guys were learning stuff that I learned in high school and middle school. So it was just like coming back into the swing of school was just, it was huge. It kind of threw me for a loop. So even though I was doing really good within my architecture classes, it was all the other classes that I was kind of struggling with. So it wasn't so much if I was struggling with this program, this degree, it was all the other stuff outside of this that I really didn't want to be in, because it wasn't really my passion. This was my passion. And it was taking time away from that. So how did I deal with that? Like I said, I leaned on the people around me. I joined a Bible study. And that really helped me because it took my mind off of school and off of, landscape architecture. I started to go on walks and drives. Like, I learned that I had a huge passion for vehicles and for automobiles and driving around. I literally could probably tell you all the county roads around here in Muncie, because every time we would get a project sheet, rather than me sitting there and racking my brain on ideas, I would drive around and think about it and dissect the whole entire problem statement in my head while driving around, because that was my outlet to relieve some of that stress that I was feeling. So, I think that's just the biggest thing. It's just trying to sit down and actualize to yourself what's going to take for me to relieve some of this stress, and fit those into your week, into your schedule. Make it a priority to do these things that are going to relieve some of that stress, even if it's going to over here to the rec and taking laps in the pool. I did that at times, early in the mornings, because I just needed to get woken up, because being in a studio and locked up for 5 hours is going to do something to your mind. You're not going to think straight, all right? Let alone look at your drawings the same. So even if it's just not, you're not struggling with the program, but you're struggling just to get things done in time, or maybe you get things done in time, but when it comes to presentations, you're dead, and your presentation is horrible. Why? Because you're just dead. You're tired, you're drained, you know, you've been in the studio for 2 hours, 3 days, however long. I always learn before that kind of stuff, you need to take a break and you need to go do something for yourself before any big presentation, before any big, you know, project release date or anything like that. You just need to have that outlet just to breathe. So a lot of times that's what I did. That's just what I did. I would go and talk to somebody for an hour, or I would go and do something for myself for an hour. And then I'd get back to whatever I was needing to do. But did it work all the time? No. But I could still see that I was better than I was before that hour. That I took that hour, I would have been worse, you know? So it's just, I think just doing those things consistently is gonna get you to the finish line. I got to the finish line 5th year and I didn't even know how. I was like, man, I was literally this close to pulling out so many times. Like, how did I even get here and graduated? And then I started looking around and it was all the people that were around me that helped me, you know? And all those times that I just broke away and did me, just did me. Even though I had all these other obligations, I was just like, no, I need to do me for an hour. So I just suggest, yeah, take the time that you need to focus on yourself and you'll get through it.
And in the interest of fielding many questions from the crowd in Zoom, we'll have one person, one guest speaker answer each question. Are there any, what's a question from Zoom, Christina?
What do you guys think is better, to live to work or to work to live? Sorry, if that makes any sense.
Maya, you want to answer that? Neither, honestly. I don't do either one. I believe in following whatever you believe in, spiritually, religious, whatever. But like, follow your inner drive, whatever that might be. If you need money to live, it's gonna come. If you need a place to live, it's gonna come. If you need food to eat, it's gonna come. But like, follow your drive. So I don't live to work. I don't work to live. I do what I love to do for a living.
Any other questions from the crowd? Yes?
Just hearing all of guys speak has really inspired me a lot, actually, and I would love to know who inspired you to get into the field you are today, and how do you think it affected how you guys do it?
Maya, a question from the crowd was, who inspired you and how they have affected your work today?
I think I heard half of it. Can you say it again?
So who inspired you and how did that affect your work today?
It's a good question. I think that a lot of people have inspired me, but if I think back to, there are 2 people that come to mind immediately, and I think that this is a Ball State lecture. Majora Carter came, I forget what year, but she was like the first Black woman in design that was doing something that wasn't just, I mean, I think she's an urban planner technically, but she does a million different things, including like she owns a coffee shop. And so I was so inspired by the fact that she was not following a certain path. And she wasn't just sitting in like a planning office at like city. She was really using her urban planning degree to do interesting things that she thought was interesting and kind of charted her own path. And so that was the first person. And the second person, I think I didn't know until I did my thesis, but that's Emily Pillowton, who's in Berkeley, and she started what's called Girls Garage, which is it's a very similar program to Chicago Filmmakers. But she's really thinking about woodworking and welding, specifically for girls. And so I remember during my thesis process calling her when I was, fangirling, and she was like at the steel mill picking up steel for her 7-year-old girl's 12 later in the day. And like, I thought that was just amazing. And so I think that I have found a lot of these women who are people of color who are just charting their own paths and not really worrying about conforming to whatever field that they were in. Emily actually did her architecture degree in Chicago a while back. And so those are two people off the top of my head that really had a huge effect on what I'm doing today.
I have a question for Adrian. You had brought up that during like your first year, there was another black male student in your studio, and you didn't communicate with them, and I can relate to that. Even though I have kind of communicated, I wouldn't say that I went as far as to really strive to become good friends with them. So I mean, I don't know if this question is too deep, but would you say that it is a problem that is a problem with the school, or is that a problem with us? If that makes sense.
Why you put me on the spot like
Well, who's in this room? That's how I answer this question.
I love cats.
It's funny you say that. Like I said, I mean, years later, you have time to reflect on, trying to get into your own mental space that you're in. And I'm sure you can relate to this. I think,
Could you repeat it one more time for Zoom? I'm sorry.
No, I just said, the question?
Yeah.
The question that was asked to me was, earlier I made a comment of, when I first came into the CAT program, I was only one of 2 black males in my entire design studio. And the question was asked, do I think that's an issue with the students per se, say myself or any other students with that experience, or is that an issue with the faculty or the program itself?
Whether you guys interact or not.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Now say that, I would say it's a little bit of both. That's my best answer. I would say it's a little bit of both. When you come into a program like this, and I came up in the inner city of Indianapolis where I went to public school, so it was always, a mixed environment, but there was more often than not more minorities than there were, let's just say, Caucasians. But you come into a program like this from where I came from, and it's a bit of a culture shock. So I think sometimes, and I'm going back to when I was 18 years old as well, as a freshman in this program, sometimes when you're the only person like you in a room, and it's a huge room of people, and you see another like you, it's almost a pressure that you feel to where you don't want to be, you don't want to grab the low-hanging fruit. And what I mean by that is, you don't want to just go gravitate to the one person that looks like you in a sense. It's almost funny where you feel that your counterparts almost expect you to do that. And in a way, you're trying to endear yourself, or you're trying to prove yourself to those that don't look like you, that you feel dominate this space or dominate this room. So in a sense, it's almost as if, say, you and I, we're the only 2 African-American males in this entire room. In a sense, I might want to introduce myself to you, and I might want to ask you about yourself, and you may feel the same way towards me. But in a way, we might also try to avoid one another because, in a sense, it's not about me impressing you. It's not about me proving myself to you. It's about me proving my worth and my value to all of them. You get what I'm trying to say? So I think as a young man in that space, that was a failure of mine, not doing a better job personally of going and introducing myself to that individual. And it's funny, all these years later, we've actually reconnected. And now that we've reconnected, exactly what I just mentioned to you, he felt that exact same way. So now, years removed from the program, now he's actually a great contact of mine and vice versa. But I say this a little bit of both because at the same hand, I think that it's always important to be sensitive to what others may feel. So at the same hand, I do wish that, the faculty or leadership would have done a better job to encourage certain interactions between individuals that may be able to draw from one another and relate to one another. So now that I have an opportunity to serve in a leadership position, I'm always trying to be mindful of individuals that they don't know how to feel, they don't know what to think or what to do because they may feel that one way or another they're going to be wrong anyway. So I think it's important for all of us when we get the opportunity to have any influence or be able to, have any voice in any space, in any setting, it's important to always empathize, show grace, and be mindful of those individuals that need you. They need you to advocate for them. They need you to represent them. They need you to have their best interests at heart. So hopefully that answered your question.
Definitely, thank you.
That was a great answer. That was I hope y'all heard that, because I did.
So we are low on time, so I'd ask not to put pressure on you all that you answer this in maybe 5 seconds. But no, I meant 5 sentences, not seconds. I'm sorry. I'm nervous and misspeaking up here. Do you all have sketchbooks, and how do you fill them up, and maybe how frequently do you fill them?
I have a notebook and a sketchbook. Notebook is for work, and that is really just jot down quick, dirty notes and tasks, because like I said, with having 20-some projects within all different phases of design, you kind of need to keep a tallying book of what kind of tasks have been accomplished throughout your day so that you can actually track that within your project scopes, because you kind of have to charge for the time that you bill on each project, right? So you have to keep track of all that. So I have that, and then I also have a sketchbook and my iPad sketchbook, and which I use all the time for little quick doodles with owners. It's a very powerful tool to have with you if you have a sketchbook or a iPad on a quick meeting when they're talking about, oh, I want this here or this, that. It's just so easy that just whip out a section drawing and draw that real quick, and they're just like, to them, it's just, that's magic. You're just like, whoa, they're like, whoa, is this final? They'll ask you that multiple times too. So be careful with your sketchbooks and how detailed you get with your sketches. Because I mean, you could bring 5, 6 pens with you with different colors and all this and drawing and sketching, and that will be the first question they'll ask is, well, is that final? Is this final? It's like, no, this is just an ideas, So yeah, I mean, definitely carry a sketchbook with you. I always do. But iPads I found have been a lot more useful just because you don't run out of sheets and it's easy just to flip through things and zoom in. Rather on a notepad, it's pretty hard to zoom in. So.
Yes, quick and dirty, yes, they're sitting right there. The notebook is brand new because I just ran out from the old one. And iPad, I definitely concur. It's like the best thing. Bread on cheese is amazing. Yes. Cheese and bread. What is it? Cheese and butter on bread. Yeah. That's what it is.
I got 5 sentences, so I'm gonna try to keep it within that. But for me, everything's my sketchbook. So I guess the answer is yes. I'm into flipping houses. So for me, I'm sketching on anything and everything, and that's fun to me. So if I'm meeting with a contractor, if I'm trying to communicate an idea, I'll grab a carpenter's pencil and I'll just go to the wall and I'll just start sketching the idea on the wall, or whatever I'm trying to communicate, I'll sketch it on the wall, or 2x4s or anything like that. So I would say really everything around me has become something for me to mark up or sketch on, or just have an excuse just to be a kid. So that's just the truth for me.
I mean, get used to it. Y'all are designers, so the world is your canvas.
Maya, did you hear the question?
Yeah, okay, so to be honest, I don't sketch. I've never been much of a sketcher, but I do take lots of, I'm looking at my notebook right in front of me. I have lots of meetings and I just take a lot of notes. And usually the only sketching I do is if I'm trying to, give someone an idea what I'm thinking about in my head, but I honestly don't sketch as much as I should.
Thank you for that answer, Maya. So I'd like to thank all of you for your time and coming out. I'd also like to thank the Dean and the CAP program. We received a lot of support for this program, this event. And thank you, Dr. Dotson, for the vision for this first annual symposium. We're going to keep doing this. And I'd also like to thank my exec team scattered around here. They did a great job helping me set this up. And we definitely want to keep saying it. We are in AB 310 Monday at 5 p.m. and you will see flyers around. So I'd love to see all of you there. Thank you.